I was almost kidnapped when I was 10. Hey, I've never actually posted this story anywhere and haven't told it to many folks. This really rattled me as a kid. I was about 10 when this happened. I'm 27 now, but I still have nightmares about this. When I was little, every few years my family would go back to my mom's hometown, and we'd camp there for about a week or so during the summer, when I was on summer break. And this place, Edgewood, is a pretty small town. It has a population of 250 people, give or take, last I checked anyway. It was in a very rural part of the province, surrounded by forests and rather out of the way, with a close-knit community of people who all knew each other. My mom and stepdad and my 3-year-old sister stayed at our family friend's house to visit, but as soon as I sat down, my mom told me to take the dog for a walk, and gave me a $5 to take with me to the convenience store along the way, so that I could get an ice cream or a drink, which I was thrilled with, so off I went. The walk to the store was pretty uneventful. The town is incredibly small, and practically everything was within walking distance. The convenience store was about a 5-minute walk away, so I didn't have a hard time finding my way there. Once I bought my Pepsi, I went ahead and sat outside in the front of the store in the shade, taking a moment to sip at my drink before heading back to the house. That's when a blue car pulled up. I wasn't in the area often, so I didn't recognize anybody I met beyond the few family friends my mom would take us to visit every time we were in town. The person in the car rolled down their window and looked over at me, offering a smile and a wave. She looked rather unkempt, and appeared to be in what I could only assume was her mid-50s. She was dirty, her hair was messy, and her car was covered in rusty spots, with cracked and damaged windows. I glanced up, offered a polite smile, and went back to my drink. It wasn't uncommon for people to be friendly in that community, so I didn't think anything of it for the most part. She called out to me, "Hey there, what's your name?" I looked up again, a bit hesitant to say anything. I was a bit shy around new folks. Kayla, I answered, not saying much else. I did get taught about stranger danger, but given that this town was a very small, tight-knit community, it didn't cross my mind at the time. I assumed I was safe. "Well, Kayla, I've got this makeup here, and you can have it if you want. I think you'd look beautiful with this makeup. Do you want to come and try it on?" 2. Don't ever get into a van, a car, or a truck, any vehicle with someone I didn't know. I said no again, and explained that my family was waiting for me. She looked annoyed at this point, and insisted again. "Well, I can drive you back, but you just need to get in the car." She was snapping at me at this point, and I was reasonably rattled. I didn't say anything else, and instead hurried off with my dog, hastily enough to where I forgot to even take my Pepsi with me. I don't know why, but something in my head told me to not lead the woman to the house my family was at. So instead, I walked off to the campsite, which was about another 5 minutes away. I figured she wouldn't have any reason to follow me to a campsite that likely had other people there, in case she wanted to try anything. But of course, here's where I was wrong. The campsite was particularly empty that day, and it's not really monitored by anybody, so this was probably the dumbest idea I could have had. I walked along the path that led to the road full of campsite lots, and sure enough, one glance behind me sent chills down my spine, and my stomach sank. The woman was following me in her car. She was a good 10 to 15 meters away, but was keeping pace with me, like she was waiting for me to stop. I panicked, picked up my dog, and walked a bit faster down the road to see if I could get anybody's attention and ask for help. In my panic, I found one man who was setting up his campsite, and I ran to him as fast as I could. I desperately tried to explain what was happening. I was on the verge of tears, explaining that someone who tried to get me into their car was following me. He hummed and eventually said, "Sorry, I've got my dog with me. I can't leave her here for long. I hope you find your way back," and left me on my own. Tears streamed down my face as I begged him one more time, but it didn't change his answer. I looked behind me and noticed that the blue car was gone. I thought that maybe she gave up or didn't want to be seen, but either way, I took this opportunity to sprint away again, desperately looking for somewhere that would let me sneak back to the house off of the main campsite road. Off the side of the road there was a very thick array of bushes. I picked up my dog once again and ran off into the brush until I was far away enough and hidden enough from the road. I held my dog tight and patiently waited to see if the car would drive by, watching through the bushes. A few minutes passed, and sure enough, there she was, driving by again slowly, almost like she was looking for something. Once she drove off, I wanted to make a break for it, but something told me to stay right where I was. Another few minutes passed by, and the car was back. She had looped around, driving agonizingly slowly. And that wasn't the first time she looped around. She did this more times than I can even recall. I stopped counting at some point. At the final loop, I saw her park her car down the road a good 40-ish meters behind where I was hiding, as she got out and started walking down the road, and again, like she was looking for something. I was practically petrified. I lay there for God knows how long, waiting as she walked down the road. Eventually I heard her mumble something and swear at the end of the sentence, before she walked back up to her car. She hit the hood of her car before getting back in and speeding off. I waited another half hour, give or take, before I finally plucked up the courage to grab my dog and run as fast as I could back to the house. By the time I had gotten there, my legs were shaking and I could barely stand. My lungs were on fire and I was on the verge of tears again. My mom came out and scolded me for taking so long, asking me why I was gone for as long as I was. I broke out in tears, explaining to her what exactly happened and how I was followed and looked for at least an hour. She shrugged and explained that nobody here would do anything like that, and went back inside. Our family friend James pulled me aside and asked me to describe the woman and the car. He said, "We know a lot of people here in town. I might know who you're talking about." I told him everything I saw, and he hummed, glancing up while he pondered what he could recall about people he knew in town. "Yeah, I don't know anybody with a car like that here in town. I'll ask around and see if anybody else knows who you're talking about." The rest of the evening was pretty uneventful, but I stayed inside and refused to leave the house. James eventually pulled my mom aside to talk to her again, but I didn't hear their conversation. The remainder of the trip was otherwise calm, but for the rest of our time in town, I wasn't allowed to go anywhere without my mom or my stepdad, and any time I had to take the dog for a walk, one of them always came with me. I don't think I was ever alone again during that trip, excluding when I needed to use the washroom. Whatever James told my mom, I want to say that it got her to take me seriously. I don't think anybody knew who that woman was, but honestly, I'd rather not find out. That story alone would have been enough to shake anyone. But the next person had no idea what was coming. The day I was almost murdered while hiking on the Natchez Trace. So this is kind of a long story, but I'll try to keep it as brief as I can, while still including all the relevant info I can still remember. I was 15 at the time. I live in the South, in a town that was built along the Natchez Trace. For anyone who doesn't know, the Natchez Trace is a very long stretch of road that runs almost the entire length of the United States north to south. It was used by tribes way back when to quickly get around the country, for trade, and during the Civil War was used by both Union and Confederate soldiers for travel. It is federally protected land now and feels very isolated. No one is allowed to build anything within about a mile of the trace, and there are no streetlights, just a 2-lane road. There are burial mounds, even unnamed Civil War graves, and lots of offshoot hiking trails. It is extremely illegal to dig up anything, etc. In my town, it isn't uncommon to go hiking out there because it's absolutely gorgeous, but there were stories about being careful. I remember in the 90s a young woman was killed out there while hiking, and there were all these sort of boogeyman stories about not being out on the trace after dark. Hiking the trace was something that me and some friends used to do a lot when we were young. We used to go off trail often, because you can find some really cool stuff back there. One day me and a buddy were out there going through some trails and checking stuff out like we always did. It was in the spring and not quite summer yet, but the days were starting to get longer. It wasn't super late, but later than we were usually out. Just barely dusk. We were about an hour or two into hiking and had gone off trail like usual. We come up on this break in the trees that opened up in this big open field, and there's a break in the trees that opened up in this big open field. That alone was a huge red flag, because you can't use any vehicles off-road there. but there were two dudes next to the truck with shovels and enough dirt next to them that you could tell they'd been digging a pretty big hole for a while. The bed of the truck was open, but we couldn't see inside it from where we were. They looked up at us, and there was like this weird second or two where no one said anything. And I don't remember who moved first, but I remember the dudes both jumping into the truck, starting it up, and driving full speed toward us. We ran back into the trees in a panic, because we thought for sure they were going to run us down. I remember hearing the truck stop at the trees behind us as we ran, and hearing them get out yelling. We ran for what felt like a solid couple minutes before we jumped into a deadfall of broken trees, and just stayed as quiet as we could. We could hear them a ways off, and could hear dogs barking as well, like they had dogs with them. And I specifically remember hearing one of them yell at some point, "I can't see you, but I can hear you, and my dog's gonna get you." We just stayed quiet and didn't move, because we never heard them get close enough that we thought they'd spot us. Eventually, we heard the truck start again in the distance, and stayed out until we couldn't hear it anymore, and then we carefully walked back to the car without saying a word. I remember the whole ride home. We were quiet, and every pair of headlights we saw made me almost have a heart attack, because I thought it was going to be them looking for us. I never found out what they were doing out there, but it must have been something bad. When I was younger, my brain always went to the obvious cliché, like someone hiding a body. Mostly because it would be a good spot to do it. No one looks for stuff out there. But as I got older, I began to think that it was probably either dirty money or drug stashes. The town is also small enough that I've always wondered if I ever ran into these people again out in public and just not known it. Getting groceries or running errands, how many times have I been a car or two behind them at a stoplight? To this day, it gives me the willies. Edit. Thanks for the karma and discussion, everyone. This thread prompted me to ask around about the Natchez Trace's historical route in the years leading up to and directly after the American Revolution. A helpful Redditor led me to this link documenting its route as it changed through history, and it's a very good read if the topic interests you. The present-day Natchez Trace terminates just outside of Nashville, Tennessee. However, the extended routes from way back when still exist under different names. Now, if you thought that was unsettling, wait for the next story. Creepy, crazy truck guy. This happened last night. I was hungry, decided I wanted a late-night snack, and decided to make a run up to Sheetz for some hot dogs and fries. My husband is visually impaired, and Sheetz is only a few miles down the road, so I told him to just stay here. Got my food order and headed home. There wasn't much traffic, other than a white pickup truck that pulled out from the Wawa, which is across the street from the Sheetz parking lot, and followed me. Whoever the driver was beeped their horn and flashed their brights at me. I don't know what their problem was, but they tailgated me and leaned on the horn. We came to a red light, so of course I had to stop. The truck's driver, a burly guy in a long coat, jumped out of the truck. He ran toward my car, shouting and waving his arms. I ran the red light. Dunno what his problem was, and couldn't understand what he was yelling, but I sure wasn't going to stay and find out. I ran the red light and sped off. I was pretty rattled when I got home. So to the creepy pickup truck driver, let's not meet. If stories like these keep you up at night, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Reddit Story Vault, because every day I bring you the most chilling, real encounters posted on Reddit.